Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our weekly trade and tariff briefing. I'm Liz Radley, Director of Marketing and Communications at World Trade Center, Utah. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's conversation. If you're here for the first time, this weekly webinar series is intended to provide you with the latest information about trade and tariffs. And you can view previous webinars on our YouTube channel and find updates to our tariffs dashboard on our website. We'll link that in the chat for you. Today, we're going to hear from Ben Kolendar, Chief of Staff at World Trade Center, Utah. He and Troy Keller, who is our International Trade and Commercial Policy Advisor and also a partner at Dorsey and Whitney, they're going to kind of tag team it today and mix it up a little bit, talk through all the latest and greatest with tariffs. So, with that, Ben, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Liz. And yeah, Troy and I were having a conversation last night, and we thought, you know what? We're going to mix up the format a little bit today. Normally, if I'm not available to review the dashboard, Troy's kind enough to step in and go through the updates with the group. And so we thought since everybody has both of us today, we were going to go in detail on some of the 232s on steel and aluminum, which we'll still do, but thought it would be interesting for the group to have more of a dynamic conversation. We could go through each category of tariffs, and Troy's got a wonderful presentation, but have questions as we go from the audience with a lot of these tariffs and just have sort of a chat between Troy and I on the topic of tariffs. So, with that, I am going to share my screen and just briefly remind everyone. Um, we will be going back and forth a little bit with our tariffs. And so we'll be jumping around, I'm sure, from Troy's presentation, which we'll get into in a minute, and the dashboard. So just the dashboard link is a quick reminder for everybody, wtcutah.com/tariff. So if you do want to follow along with us as we go, this is where you'll go. It also has a link if you want to share this with others who may be interested. So Um, with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to shift over to, I'm not even on the right page. There we go. I'm going to shift over, Troy, to your presentation. It's all you.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, and I hope I'm not having connection difficulties, but if I do, just jump in, Ben. But so yeah, this is we're like a lot of us playing with AI and doing a little bit of vibe coding lately. This is a format that we've been playing with for doing presentations rather than slides, and it has its pros and its cons. One of its pros is there's a link that really anyone can access. You see it there in the bar, and so people can feel free, and I think we'll try to put it in the chat as well. People can feel free to go to that. I'll leave it kind of posted for a while, and so this we'll kind of move through these tabs and walk through some updates, and it lets us do some things a little more, like Ben said, dynamically. So this first one, oh, and sorry, let me give my personal disclaimer on all this. I am, as Ben well knows, I'm a law and policy guy, and trade is a high focus of that. We follow it very closely. We help companies, both the World Trade Center and in my legal role, help companies look ahead and try to plan and engage, be at the table. I'm not a trade specialist, so there'll be times when I'll say I might have to come back to you on that question after I consult a colleague. Although Ben knows all the details on trade compliance quite well these days. So I figure between us, we probably can't answer almost any question, but that is just my little disclaimer there. We love to help companies engage, both the World Trade Center and at Dorsey. So on this first tab here, we call it current tariff stack, and that is just to kind of set the table a little bit for where we're at today, a year in. And as everyone knows, we've been writing this every week. A lot of things have been moving around pretty fast. So after the Supreme Court ruling, this is where we are. Before the Supreme Court, yeah, let's go ahead and hit that, Ben. Before the Supreme Court ruling, if you look at the stack on the tariffs, we kind of have the rest of the world averaged out. It's kind of in that 16, 17%. I think for most countries that we deal with, it was a little lower than that, more kind of a 12 to 15%. China, though, was much higher. Now, some of those IEEPA tariffs that you see there in purple had been postponed, subject to the ongoing dialogue between the U.S. and China. So then, after the Supreme Court ruling on IEEPA, the, today, basically, this is what it looks like. And the main difference, of course, is that those IEEPA tariffs are not there. Instead, we have these light blue shaded Section 122 tariffs. And those have filled the gap a little bit. Um, I think it's useful to talk about for a second on here, and Ben, I'd love your view as well, but it's useful to think about what the White House is trying to do with all this. I think it's been something people have been debating for a long time, but I think we have a pretty clear view now. I would say the number one thing they're trying to do is get leverage with trading partners in order to increase the US's access to things to have better deals. Maybe the second thing, well, equal with that, one and two, I think are probably similar in priority, is to get U.S. manufacturing back into the get manufacturing back into the U.S. Onshore and friendshore, a lot of stuff. Third, then would be the third priority. I would say is revenue, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end of how there's a revenue gap now. If you think about what the administration's been trying to get to, I think those are. We're going to fit those in as we talked about the pharma and the metal 232s. But Ben, do you agree with that in terms of like priorities? Anything else you'd slide in there or reorder?
Yeah, I would just say I think what I heard early on is, well, what is it? Is it revenue or is it national security or is it, domestic production? You can't have them all, or that you heard a lot of this. Which one is it? We're confused. And I think what we're seeing over time is it's a lot of these things combined all under an umbrella of sort of a national security slash national emergency theme, whether that's for legal purposes or with many of the things that we see playing out now. Um, yeah, I think what the focus is all reshoring, getting ourselves stable in our supply chains, doing some other things, all within a like a hat or an umbrella of a national security. So, yeah, I think that's accurate, and I think you can have multiple objectives at once, and that's sort of what we've seen over time clear up in some of the messaging and the implementation. So.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And given President Trump's his, I don't know what the right word for it is, his ability to sort of change his views on a dime, we've seen some of that some of that flexibility weigh in. So if another factor that I don't think is necessarily a goal of the tariffs, but that the president watches very closely, are these macroeconomic things, mostly the stock market. And so we've seen at times where he's found ways to pull back when he believes the stock market is being impacted too much, the economy is being impacted too much by the tariffs. That's kind of a reactionary thing that'll happen on a dime. And interestingly, on these most recent tariffs, I think even though they are significant and meaningful for U.S. manufacturers, they did not seem to move the dime on the stock market. Now, the Iran situation clearly overshadowed everything, so that's probably the main reason. But you certainly did not see, or even hear commentators. You look, the financial journalism did not tout these as significant impacts that CEOs were looking at or talking about. Again, down here in Utah with SME manufacturers, I think we feel it a little differently. But anyway, just for perspective.
I do think, Troy, it's worth calling out. You could see a theme in these charts when you call out China and the rest of the world. It's pre-SCOTUS, it's post-SCOTUS. We've heard from USTR publicly, the United States Trade Representative. We've heard the policy of really looking at more regional nearshoring in the United States, and the lens or the perspective that when you get closer to China, think of it as you know, a polar opposite of safety and tariff levels. The closer that you get to China, it will be either higher risk for your supply chains or higher tariffs or a combination of both. We've heard the advice that, if you want to be safe with your supply chain, generally have lower tariffs. You're going to want to be in or close to the United States, just as a philosophical lens over all of this. And I imagine if you broke out rest of the world, but also like broke out Asia versus South America, for instance, you'd see another tier of difference in the tariffs would be higher the further you get away from the United States. So just one other thing to call out and what we're seeing in the trends and yeah, and the philosophy of the administration.
Yeah, and that's those are some of the insights that are so important to factor in when you're thinking about your long-term supply contracts, long-term investment in manufacturing. Good. Well, should we look at the pharmas? Yeah. So uh, I don't think we'll spend a ton of time on because, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, or in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. If you look at the list of companies that were targeted in the annexes, those are all like the international pharmaceutical manufacturers. I don't think that this one, it'll obviously have an impact on Utah consumers, but I don't think it has a significant impact on our manufacturing here in the state. We have a great biotech uh, sector, medical device sector in the state, but again, these are patented drugs that are manufactured overseas and come to the U.S. So I don't see that as a major factor. We're still going to walk through because it's interesting, frankly, from a perspective, from a overall perspective, it's interesting to see what the administration was trying to do with these. I think that'll be useful for our broader conversation.
Yeah, and Troy, just a note on there, and I'm going to pull back up your slides for a second because this is a great visual here that really outlines what they're trying to do. But it's an interesting tariff because if you look at it, what they're trying to do is they'll target products. They're also looking at specific companies in tiered objectives, and they're also looking at countries. So you have all of these objectives that are rolled up into a tariff in a really interesting way that it's
It looks like Ben might be glitching a little bit, Troy.
Oh, I was afraid it was me that was glitching. Okay, good, good.
No,
Well,
I think it's
I mean, not good, but
Ben.
I'll jump in, and when he comes back on, he can.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. So, yeah, I think what where Ben was headed is that the it is a fascinating executive order. It's highly there are so many layers. It's highly complicated, and so what we tried to do here was, not simplify it for purposes of this discussion. Oh, I guess we lost the chart too. That's okay. Liz, if you're able to pull that up, that'd be great. But basically, the it starts with this 100% tariff on prescription drugs that would come in. Yeah, perfect. This 100% default penalty, but almost no one is going to be paying that because how we talked about before that the administration has these goals it's trying to reach. One that we didn't mention, and on purpose, is that's somewhat unique to this executive order. In this one of their goals, stated straight up front, is to reduce the cost of prescription drugs in the US. So that was their so this is kind of a one-off. And the way they do that is say, hey, you're going to pay this 100% penalty unless you do a most favored nation. So if you see the very left of this bar chart where there's 0% tariffs, if you've struck that most favored nations deal and you agree with the US that you're not going to charge US consumers any more than you charge consumers in other countries. And there's these other levels If you commit like that yellow orange bar, if you commit to do onshoring, and that's just a one-on-one negotiation that big pharma can have with the administration, just make a commitment that they believe that'll reduce you down to 20%. And then, of course, they are still honoring some of these trade deals that they've made with other countries like the EU and the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea. So you can see the administration trying to signal, yes, we might add new tariffs, but if you deal with us, then you'll be treated better. So I think that is, again, all this kind of just interesting backdrop and insight into the philosophy that the administration is using on the tariff front. So maybe looking down that title below, public health readiness is national security threat. This was interesting. As a reminder, this on the pharma stuff, they started this 232 investigation, which is the process they have to run, basically a year ago. And they finished the investigation towards the end of 2025. I suspect while their attention was shifted with the IEPA and Supreme Court discussions and debate, they kind of maybe slowed down the rollout, but then it eventually comes. So this has been a long time coming. But again, showing the one-offness of this particular tariff, they've defined public health readiness as a national security threat, and that's what they were addressing with these. So again, super interesting. I'm hoping this one doesn't have a huge impact on Utah, or even a huge impact on the U.S. Frankly, if the administration gets what it's trying to get in terms of cooperation from big pharma. Okay, let's move on to the next tab now. So these are the metal related. So copper, aluminum, and steel. These are potentially quite impactful for Utah companies. So we're going to spend a minute on how to think about these, and you will be aware, of course, that unlike the pharma one where it was rolled out kind of for the first time, there have been a number of Section 232 tariffs that have been levied over the last year or so. This kind of consolidates everything, resets the table, and clarifies some things. So for a long time, it was unclear. Initially, it was unclear how if you have an item that you're shipping into the U.S., how the pre-existing framework applied on the tariff front, and it was quickly kind of sorted out with Customs and Borders that you would pay as the importer, you would pay tariffs basically on the amount of metal in your product. And that was the approach used in recent months. This resets that. And we can talk about the reasons why it resets it. But interestingly, this says, okay, if you're just importing copper, steel, and aluminum, then you will still pay that full 50% tariff. So you look on the right there, that heavy, that's the Annex 1A stuff in the executive order. And so items that are predominantly or pretty much full metal products, those are going to get hit with the 50% tariff. This Annex 1B, these are derivative products that have a meaningful amount of metal in them, but maybe they're majority, maybe they're I think anywhere above 15%, between 15% and kind of that higher level. If they hit that threshold, then they get taxed. And this is the difference, not on the amount of metal, but if they're in that band, then they're taxed on the value of the import. And so they have that 25% tariff rate on the full value of the import. So for some people, that might help them, but probably for most, it's not going to be good news because, again, it's a lower tariff than the 50%, but you're taxing the full product there. Real briefly, I'll mention we got some special exceptions. Those, some aerospace related ones, their deals or exemptions have been provided before, and those are continuing to be honored now. That aircraft that come into the U.S. from certain countries, et cetera, won't be hit with the full tariff on the metals. This green bar, U.S. metal poured, that's a 10% tariff if you're using metal products that are manufactured in the U.S., then you ship them perhaps to Mexico or Canada for some more work done on them, and they come back and they're clear then. And then there's this de minimis approach here, a different de minimis than the one I think that we've been familiar with. This is if your product has less than 15% metal, then interestingly, there'll be no tariff at all on it. And that is, and so this one, the interplay between this de minimis piece and so you have think of these three categories of products: those that have less than 50% metal, those that have 15% to to the majority, and then you have these products that are basically full on metal, and those are in. So you have these the interplay between these three ranges, which gives manufacturers perhaps a tool to work with, perhaps not, depending on the type of product and your flexibility. So Liz, let's scroll down a little bit to yeah, this what should I be doing right now with this? And so um, so number one, look at your full you need to look at your supply chain again. Now this is common every time a tariff announcement comes out. We all know we need to kind of reanalyze our supply chain and see, okay, how is this new approach going to impact what I'm doing? How do I tweak it? Ben and I talked early on how the clear China focus sends a clear message, and we've heard it frankly verbally as well from the White House. Get as close as you can to the U.S. So we knew that here, your full supply chain again. If you're able to do things to get your metal production inside the U.S. and use U.S. metals, even if your production is in Mexico or anywhere, then let's then again do that hard analysis. Number two, oh Ben, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. First of all, sorry for the technology issues, but and maybe you covered this, Troy, but I was just going to say briefly, a lot of folks have had exemptions on these codes. When we think through Utah companies, the HTS code didn't apply to their operation, and therefore they didn't have to pay a tariff on this 232 tariff. But now with these broader categories in these HTS amendments, and what you were showing, we're going to drop a link in the chat. Everybody, another thing folks should do is literally go in and look at your HTS codes against the new set of HTS codes because a lot has changed from where this 232 was to where it's at now. And verifying, not getting surprised by a 25% tariff is going to be a big deal for many Utah companies.
Yeah, excellent. That's yeah, Ben. I think that should be part of the analysis, going back through and seeing how it's going to impact you
Yep.
from the categorical standpoint as well. Yeah, I hope that does not become too painful for manufacturers here. But I suspect there will be some things that slide through that weren't affected before. The other, what should I be doing right now? In this one, I haven't had a lot of conversations with businesses just because it's so recent. So I don't know how realistic this is, but consider reformulating. Consider on your product. Maybe you're at 20% metal. Can you put in some more plastic, some more carbon fiber, move things around and drop below that threshold? If you can, huge benefit, right? You go from a 25% tariff on all of the value of your product to no 232 tariff. So that is going to be worth it for everybody who imports. And back to what Ben was saying, I worry that on some things like medical device components, um, our medical device companies, I suspect this will not be great because they import a number of components from other countries, but a lot of those do have meaningful amounts of metal in them. Hey Ben, I on the bottom there, you're our FTZ um, guru, and I did notice and thought it was interesting that this executive order is took it not a swing at FTZs, but basically said, hey, we don't want you getting around this tariff by
Yeah.
using FTZs. So they're requiring that all products come in under the privileged foreign status. Do you want to explain what that means and how that works?
I love any opportunity to talk about privileged foreign status. Thanks,
Yes.
Troy. So, privileged foreign status really is if you think about when you bring in your product and it's logged into a foreign trade zone, the privileged foreign status is essentially going to lock in the tariff rate. And when you bring it into the zone to when you actually do what you're going to do in a foreign trade zone and it enters U.S. commerce, you're going to pay that tariff no matter what. That's what this um, executive order outlines in the privilege foreign status mandate. However, what companies oftentimes don't pay close attention to is you can have ways that you could still save with the foreign trade zone. We won't even talk about weekly entry and all these other things and supply chain cleanups, but with the foreign trade zone, there are two key things that to consider. One is scrap. If you have a lot of scrap in your organization, it's you're not going to pay the tariff on what's coming in. So if you're in an operation that you have a lot of scrap that's metal, um, you could have substantial savings by being in a foreign trade zone if that metal is scrapped. The other thing is if you're going to export from the zone and it's not entering US commerce, but you're going to go send it to other countries outside of the United States, that's also a drastic tariff savings. Whereas think of it like an island that it never touched US soil, so to speak. So you would oftentimes save quite substantially if you're looking at one of those two strategies, even with the privileged foreign status in the foreign trade zone being mandated on these 232 tariffs. And this is across the board, not just with this one. We saw it with IEPA. This privileged foreign status is being used quite extensively on many of the tariffs coming out from the Trump administration.
And Ben, of course, also just just saving this the time frame savings. You bring product in, whether
Yeah.
it's privileged foreign required to be that or not. You leave it in your trade zone until you actually are ready to sell it. You've saved working capital right there by pushing off the payment of the tariff.
Yeah, your cash flow savings and as well. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, well, let's go to the last tab. We got a couple minutes left, and we just wanted to give a short kind of look ahead. And so some important dates coming up. April 15. So I think we've talked on this webinar before about the 301 comment process. So as we mentioned in the first tab, we've got the 122s are going to expire here in July. As you see that date down there, July 24th is when that section 122, unless they're extended by Congress, those expire. And what will the administration do? They're doing this accelerated 301 process to try to replace the 122s and some of the IEPA stuff with tariffs issued under Section 301. They have to go through this investigation. I think as people have seen, they're doing this investigation on 16 plus countries, so it'll cover most of our trading partners. Um, April 15th, so just 5 days from now, is when the comment window closes. Highly recommend, even if it's a short comment, if you haven't and you still feel like there's something that could be useful for you to say, whether it is kind of help point out how you do something that is unique in the U.S. and an exemption should be applied, or just to let the administration know how it's going to impact businesses in your sector, or frankly, if you want to sort of point out how your competitors are treating you badly overseas or in the U.S. and this is an opportunity. So lots of things people can do, and there's still time there.
And
And then all
Troy,
this,
if
yeah,
if I could give a quick plug for our dashboard, all the links to provide comment are in our dashboard, so you could go there, navigate it, put it in. And I don't know if you want to, talk briefly about the legal reason you might want to provide comment, not just because it's your input and the federal government's asking for it, but you know, the government has to address these comments if they're of substance in how
yeah.
they lay this out. So if you want legal recourse down the road, this is your best avenue to do it on these tariffs.
Yeah. The Administrative Procedures Act requires that regulatory bodies basically review and not respond directly to the commentator, but factor that into their analysis. So they have to look at what you send. It's a great point, Ben. And then to the extent you and or a group of like-minded companies ever wanted to challenge some aspect, that gives you a basis to do that. So I think, yeah, it's a great point. Um, China Trade Summit coming up very soon. It was pushed off because of the Iran situation, and that is can't understate the significance of that. I suspect, Ben, that'll be talked about maybe in a webinar update the week before and probably the week after. That's just so significant. What kind of a deal we end up with China long term is going to really shape how we do trade and how we do manufacturing in the U.S. going forward. And then last thing, this chart really just shows how if you, we don't know what the revenue goals are for the administration, but let's assume 2025 was pretty much what their goals were. It's hard to imagine them shooting for more than that. Those were yeah, 287 billion. I don't know if this is AI generates. I don't know how exact that is, but that looks like it's in the right ballpark. And the 2026, this is the projection where we're at now with the tariff stack we showed you before. So it does not include any of the 301. So we assume that is the amount they're going to try to fill with those 301s. Where they'll get it though from, which country and how is anyone's. The 301 tariffs, of course, are sectoral. They focus on products and countries. Anyway, I think lots to look ahead. Continue to anticipate this continues to be dynamic and moving, and thanks for hanging with us. And I think that there'll be plenty more to talk about. And in the meanwhile, feel free to reach out anytime to any of us. Ben, what else do you think we ought to say here at the end?
I think this is great, Troy, and the way that you've laid this out is really helpful. I know these tariffs can be complex, and so appreciate you visualizing this. The only other things I would add is that right now, or just a short time ago, there were the oral arguments for the Court of International Trade for some of the 122 cases going. So we'll probably have some updates on that for our next briefing. And then one more thing looking ahead is the tariff refund process and what that looks like and the timelines. We're tracking April 20th for that full implementation. And so as those updates become available in full detail, we will provide them and make sure everyone's well prepared with the resources they need. So.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Ben and Troy, for taking time to speak with us today. And thanks to everyone who tuned in this week. If you have questions, like Troy mentioned, email us. Feel free to visit our website to learn more about other upcoming events, and we'll see you next Friday.